Have you ever wondered why some people stay calm, even in the middle of chaos? When everyone else is angry, they remain composed. When others react emotionally, they respond thoughtfully. And somehow, they always seem to say the right thing at the right time. So what's their secret? Are they simply born that way? Or is there something happening beneath the surface that most people never notice? Here's something fascinating. Psychologists have found that success in life isn't determined by intelligence alone. In fact, research suggests that the ability to understand and manage emotions, both your own and other people's, plays a critical role in how we build relationships, make decisions, handle stress, and earn trust. This ability has a name: emotional intelligence. The surprising part: many highly intelligent people struggle because they never learned this skill, while others with average IQs thrive because they know how to understand emotions, stay calm under pressure, and connect with people on a deeper level. So what exactly is emotional intelligence? Why do some people naturally seem to have it while others don't? And more importantly, can you actually develop emotional intelligence no matter your age? By the end of this video, you'll understand the psychology behind emotional intelligence, the science of how emotions shape your decisions, and several research-backed strategies that can help you strengthen one of the most important skills for success in life. Welcome back to the channel. Or if this is your first time here, welcome. I'm a psychologist, and today we're exploring one of the most powerful yet misunderstood aspects of human behavior: emotional intelligence. We'll uncover what emotional intelligence really is, why it matters more than most people realize, the neuroscience behind emotional awareness, a real story from my practice, and practical techniques you can start using today. If understanding the hidden mechanics of the human mind is something you care about, make sure you're subscribed, because every week we explore the psychology behind behavior, emotions, relationships, and the invisible forces that shape our everyday lives. Now, let's begin with one simple question. What if your greatest strength isn't how smart you are, but how well you understand emotions? A man sat across from me a few years ago, brilliant, successful, the kind of person who could solve almost any technical problem you put in front of him. And he said something that genuinely surprised me. He said, "Doctor, I can debug a system with 10,000 lines of code, but I cannot figure out why my wife left, why my kids barely call me, why every single person who has ever worked under me eventually asked for a transfer." He looked at me and said, "I am clearly intelligent, so why does it feel like I understand absolutely nothing about people, including myself?" What he was describing, without knowing the clinical term for it, was a profound gap in emotional intelligence. And if you have ever felt that exact same disconnect, capable in so many areas of life, and yet strangely lost when it comes to emotions, your own or other people's, then today's conversation might change the way you understand yourself entirely. I want to share why this topic sits so close to the center of my work. In nearly 2 decades of clinical practice, I've come to believe that emotional intelligence, more than intellectual intelligence, more than talent, more than circumstance, is one of the single greatest predictors of whether someone builds a life that actually feels good to live in. I have worked with people who were extraordinarily gifted, academically, professionally, financially successful, who nonetheless felt isolated, anxious, and quietly miserable, because they had never developed the internal skill set required to understand and navigate their own emotional world, let alone someone else's. Let us start with what emotional intelligence actually is, because the term gets used so often that its real meaning has become a little blurry. Emotional intelligence, often abbreviated as EQ, refers to your capacity to recognize, understand, and manage your own emotions, while also recognizing and appropriately responding to the emotions of others. Psychologist Daniel Goleman, who helped popularize the concept, broke it down into several core components: self-awareness, the ability to accurately recognize your own emotional states as they happen; self-regulation, the ability to manage those emotions rather than being controlled by them; motivation, the ability to channel emotion toward meaningful goals; empathy, the capacity to accurately sense what others are feeling; and social skill, the ability to navigate relationships and interactions with genuine attunement. What is fascinating is that unlike IQ, which tends to remain relatively stable across the lifespan, emotional intelligence is highly trainable. It is not a fixed trait you either have or do not have. It is a set of skills, much like physical fitness, that can be deliberately built and strengthened at any age. Here is where the neuroscience becomes genuinely compelling. Emotional intelligence is deeply tied to the relationship between your prefrontal cortex, the rational, reflective part of your brain responsible for planning and impulse control, and your limbic system, particularly the amygdala, which generates rapid emotional reactions. In someone with low emotional intelligence, the amygdala often hijacks the prefrontal cortex during emotionally charged moments, a phenomenon researchers sometimes call an amygdala hijack, where the rational brain essentially goes offline and the emotional brain takes full control. This is why intelligent, otherwise thoughtful people can say things in anger they deeply regret moments later, or completely misread a tense conversation while it is happening. In someone with well-developed emotional intelligence, the prefrontal cortex maintains a stronger regulatory connection to the amygdala, allowing that person to notice a rising emotional reaction, pause, and respond thoughtfully, rather than react impulsively. The remarkable part is that this connection between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala can actually be strengthened through deliberate practice, which means the capacity for emotional regulation is, quite literally, a trainable neurological skill. A significant piece of why people struggle with emotional intelligence traces back to early development. Many of us were never explicitly taught how to identify or process our emotions as children. If you grew up in a household where emotions were dismissed, where sadness was met with "be tough," where anger was punished rather than understood, or where emotional topics were simply never discussed at all, you likely reached adulthood with what I call emotional illiteracy, the inability to accurately name what you are feeling, let alone understand where it is coming from. And here is something crucial. You cannot regulate an emotion you cannot name. Research consistently shows that the simple act of accurately labeling an emotion, saying to yourself, "This is anxiety," or "This is grief," rather than just experiencing an undifferentiated wave of distress, actually reduces activity in the amygdala. Naming the emotion genuinely calms the nervous system. This is sometimes referred to in psychology as affect labeling, and it is one of the most well-supported, simple interventions we have for emotional regulation. If any of this is resonating with you so far, take a moment and hit that like button. It genuinely helps this video reach more people who might benefit from understanding this today. And drop a comment letting me know which component of emotional intelligence feels hardest for you personally, whether that is recognizing your own emotions, managing them once you notice them, or reading other people accurately, because I think you will find you are far from alone in whichever one you choose. Let me return to the man I mentioned at the very beginning, and as always, identifying details have been changed to protect privacy. His name was Gregory, 52 years old, a senior executive who came to me after his second divorce and a formal complaint filed by several members of his team at work. Gregory genuinely could not understand the pattern. He described himself accurately as logical, hardworking, and fair. But as we worked together, it became clear that Gregory had an extraordinarily narrow emotional vocabulary. When I asked him to describe how he felt in a given situation, his answers were almost always limited to fine, frustrated, or fine, I guess, regardless of what was actually happening internally. Gregory had grown up in a household where his father, a military officer, treated any display of emotion as weakness, and Gregory had adapted by essentially shutting that entire channel down decades earlier. The problem was that the emotions had not disappeared. They had simply gone unprocessed, which meant they would periodically erupt sideways, as irritability, as harsh feedback to employees, as sudden distance with the people closest to him. We began with something deceptively simple, building Gregory's emotional vocabulary from scratch, helping him distinguish between frustration and disappointment, between anxiety and overwhelm, between sadness and a quieter, harder-to-name feeling of loneliness. Slowly, as Gregory developed language for his internal world, something shifted. He began noticing his own reactions before they erupted outward. He started, for the first time in his adult life, telling his current partner what he actually felt rather than what he thought he was supposed to say. 18 months later, his team's complaints had stopped entirely, and Gregory described, almost with disbelief, what it felt like to finally understand his own internal weather, rather than being blindsided by it. So how do you actually begin building emotional intelligence in your own life? The first step is developing what I call an emotional vocabulary practice. Several times a day, pause and ask yourself specifically, what am I feeling right now? Push past vague answers like fine or stressed and try to identify something more precise. Is this irritation, or is it actually hurt? Is this anxiety, or is it excitement that your body is interpreting similarly? The more precisely you can name an emotion, the more effectively your brain can actually process and regulate it. The second step is practicing what psychologists call the pause between stimulus and response. When you notice a strong emotional reaction rising, whether it is anger in a conversation or anxiety before a difficult task, practice creating even a few seconds of space before reacting. A simple technique is to mentally note, I'm noticing anger right now, before saying or doing anything further. This small act of observation, rather than immediate reaction, engages the prefrontal cortex and helps prevent that full amygdala hijack we discussed earlier. The third step involves deliberately practicing empathic accuracy with the people in your life, which simply means actively checking your assumptions about what someone else is feeling, rather than guessing silently. Instead of assuming you know why a friend seems distant or why a partner seems upset, try gently checking. It seems like something might be bothering you. Am I reading that right? This single habit, done consistently, dramatically improves your ability to accurately read and respond to the emotional states of the people around you, which is one of the core pillars of genuine emotional intelligence. I do want to offer an important caution here. While building emotional intelligence is genuinely valuable for most people, if you find that exploring your emotional history brings up significant distress, trauma-related memories, or symptoms that feel overwhelming to process on your own, please consider working with a licensed therapist alongside this kind of self-development work. Emotional awareness, when it intersects with genuine trauma, sometimes requires the structure and safety of professional support to process in a way that feels manageable rather than destabilizing. There is one more layer to this conversation that I think deserves real attention because it is often overlooked. Emotional intelligence is not the same thing as emotional intensity, and this distinction matters enormously. Some people assume that being highly emotional, reactive, expressive, easily moved automatically means high emotional intelligence, when in reality, true emotional intelligence often looks much quieter. It looks like noticing an emotion clearly, understanding where it is coming from, and choosing a thoughtful response, rather than simply experiencing emotions loudly or visibly. Some of the most emotionally intelligent people I've worked with are remarkably calm on the surface, not because they feel less, but because they have built the internal skill to process what they feel before it spills outward. Let us bring this together with a clear summary. Emotional intelligence is the capacity to recognize, understand, and manage your own emotions, while also accurately reading and responding to the emotions of others. And unlike many traits we consider fixed, it is genuinely trainable at any age. It depends on the relationship between your prefrontal cortex and your amygdala, a connection that can be strengthened through deliberate practice. Many of us never learn this skill explicitly in childhood, which leaves us emotionally illiterate as adults. But building an accurate emotional vocabulary, practicing the pause between stimulus and response, and developing real empathic accuracy with the people around you can meaningfully strengthen this capacity over time. If this video helped you understand emotional intelligence a little more clearly today, please subscribe to the channel, because next week we are exploring why some people struggle to even recognize their own anger until it has already exploded. And based on everything we just covered, I think you are going to find that conversation closely connected to today's topic. Take care of yourselves this week. Practice naming one emotion accurately the next time something stirs in you. And remember that emotional intelligence is not something you either have or lack permanently. It is something you can genuinely build. If you are navigating significant emotional distress, please reach out to a licensed mental health professional who can support you directly. I will see you in the next one.